In the heart of West Africa, long before modern borders were drawn, a kingdom shimmered with unimaginable wealth. This land was Mali, a place of gold, power, and influence, destined to produce a man whose name would echo through centuries. His name was Mansa Musa, and his story began not in thunder and conquest, but in quiet preparation for destiny. Born into a royal lineage, Musa grew up surrounded by tales of ancient warriors, powerful rulers, and rivers of gold that ran through Mali. He watched and listened, absorbing every detail about trade routes, politics, and the delicate balance of power. Mali was already one of the wealthiest regions in the world, blessed with gold mines that sparkled beneath its soil. Caravans passed through its lands, carrying salt, ivory, and treasure to distant kingdoms. Musa learned early on that gold was more than wealth, it was power, and power required wisdom to sustain. In his youth, he walked among merchants, soldiers, and scholars, never too proud to learn from anyone. His mind grew sharper than any blade his kingdom could forge. At this time, the Mali Empire was ruled by Mansa Abu Bakr II, a visionary king with grand ambitions. Abu Bakr dreamed of exploring lands beyond the Atlantic Ocean, seeking knowledge and expansion. But such ambitions left the throne vulnerable, and Musa was chosen to act as regent in his absence. The young man, still years away from being called the richest man on earth, accepted the duty with silent resolve. As Abu Bakr prepared for his legendary voyage, Musa began learning what it meant to hold an empire together. He was not yet a conqueror or a legend, but a guardian of something far greater than himself. Mali was more than gold. It was the crossroads of Africa's trade, culture, and faith. The empire stretched over thousands of miles, with cities like Timbuktu already whispering promises of greatness. Musa studied its trade systems, diplomatic networks, and military strength with meticulous care. Every decision mattered. Every alliance counted. When Abu Bakr sailed westward with hundreds of ships, he left Musa in charge of an empire. Musa ruled in his absence with firm hands and a steady mind, proving that leadership was more than inheritance. He balanced the delicate relationship between local chiefs, traders, and religious leaders. The people began to see him not just as a temporary ruler, but as a leader destined for something greater. Years passed, and Abu Bakr never returned from his voyage. Whispers spread through the empire like dry wind over the savannah. Many believed the ocean had claimed him, while others thought he had found a new world beyond the waves. Regardless of the truth, Musa was no longer a caretaker of the throne. He was the rightful king. In 1312, he officially became Mansa Musa, Emperor of Mali, and from that moment, the world itself would bend to the golden power of his reign. Musa inherited a kingdom at its peak, rich in resources but fragile in unity. He understood that wealth alone could not secure his legacy. Power had to be reinforced through religion, diplomacy, and vision. Islam had already taken root in Mali, spreading through trade and scholarship. Musa embraced the faith, not only as a belief, but as a bridge to connect Mali to the Islamic world. He built alliances with scholars, imams, and traders who traveled from the far corners of Africa. This spiritual bond became a strategic shield, strengthening his rule and expanding Mali's influence. He was not a distant ruler hiding in his palace. He was a man of the people, visible and deliberate in his actions. His court began to grow with advisors, poets, merchants, and architects. Each of them brought something unique to the empire he was shaping. Mansa Musa's wealth came not from greed, but from strategy. Mali's gold mines, especially those of Bambuk and Bure, were the heart of its fortune. Gold flowed through the empire like blood through veins, reaching every corner of the known world. Traders from North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe knew that Mali was the source of unmatched riches. Musa did not hoard it blindly. He used it to build, to connect, and to influence. His name traveled far beyond the Sahara, carried on the tongues of merchants and storytellers. Even in lands he had never seen, people whispered of a king who possessed wealth beyond imagination. But Musa was not content with wealth alone. He craved knowledge and legacy. He knew gold could build cities, but wisdom could build empires that last forever. And so, his reign became a dance between riches and vision. He strengthened Mali's borders, securing trade routes that carried salt north and gold south. the empire's army grew disciplined. Not through brute force alone, but through loyalty. Musa rewarded competence over bloodline, a rare trait in rulers of his era. Generals, traders, and scholars alike rose through merit, not family ties. This created a powerful network of loyal servants who saw his vision as their own. Musa understood that true wealth was measured not just in gold, but in trust. And trust, once earned, could outlast any fortune. His rule turned the empire into a magnet for innovation and prosperity. The caravan routes grew busier, the markets richer, and the cities brighter. The world was beginning to notice the rise of a golden empire in West Africa. Stories of Mansa Musa began to travel north to the courts of Egypt and across the Mediterranean. Tales spoke of a man whose generosity was as vast as his gold reserves. Kings and sultans, once dismissive of distant Africa, began to take notice. European merchants drew maps where Mali glowed like a star of wealth. In bustling cities like Cairo, whispers spread about the man who could flood an entire economy with gold. Mansa Musa had not yet left his empire, but his reputation had already crossed deserts and seas. He was becoming a legend before he even began his greatest journey. A journey that would redefine wealth, power, and faith across continents. But before that pilgrimage would shake the world, Musa focused on building his empire from within. He understood that to shine abroad, his kingdom had to be unbreakable at home. In the capital, Niani Musa transformed the royal court into a symbol of Mali's glory. Intricate architecture reflected the empire's power and sophistication. Scholars gathered to debate philosophy, law, and the sciences. Poets sang of his generosity. Traders praised his wisdom, and soldiers respected his discipline. The city became a beacon of culture, standing proudly on the banks of the Niger River. Musa saw that power was not just in conquest, but in the story a kingdom tells the world. And the story he was weaving was one of gold, faith, and strength. He looked beyond his time, imagining Mali not just as a kingdom, but as a symbol. A place future generations would speak of with awe. A place where history and legend would blur together. Musa's rise was not accidental. It was forged through intelligence, patience, and vision. He was becoming more than a king. He was becoming a figure of myth. His empire stood at the threshold of a transformation that would shake the medieval world. The next step of his journey would not be a battle, but a pilgrimage. A pilgrimage that would display his unimaginable wealth to the entire Islamic world. And through that act, Mansa Musa would enter the pages of history like no one before him. But in these early years, the foundation of his greatness was already being laid stone by stone. The people adored him, the world whispered about him, and the sands of the Sahara carried his name. Mali had a king unlike any other. And soon, the world would see just how far gold could carry a man's legend. As the sun rose over Mali's horizon, Musa's mind was consumed by a single purpose: to make a journey unlike any other in history. His destination was Mecca, but his mission was far greater than faith alone. He understood the power of spectacle, how a single journey could transform the world's perception of his empire. Mansa Musa called forth his architects, generals, and treasurers to plan the pilgrimage. Word spread through the empire like wildfire. Thousands volunteered to accompany the king on his legendary Hajj. Craftsmen forged ornate saddles, embroidered with silk and gold thread. Every detail was crafted to project unmatched power. What other kings hoarded in vaults, Musa displayed openly. It was to be not just a journey of wealth, but of knowledge, faith, and diplomacy. At the front rode Mansa Musa himself, clad in flowing robes of white and gold. Behind him trailed the royal guards, armed with spears inlaid with golden accents. They protected not just the king, but a fortune beyond imagination. The route would take them across the burning Sahara. No kingdom had ever planned a pilgrimage of this scale. Cheers and chants echoed through the capital. This was not just a departure, it was the beginning of a legend. But Musa's caravan was prepared for its brutal vastness. Musa's leadership shone brightest in these harsh moments. When water grew scarce, he ordered supplies shared equally, regardless of rank. Musa's men huddled around fires while storytellers recited the epics of old Mali. He was not just a ruler, he was the embodiment of a people's soul. Tents collapsed, camels bellowed, and gold-laden bags nearly vanished into the dunes. The caravan held together, surviving what could have been disaster. Musa looked up at the heavens and whispered a prayer. As the caravan neared the Egyptian border, the landscape shifted. Traders and travelers rushed to see the spectacle. The king's entry into Cairo was unlike anything the city had ever witnessed. Golden dust trailed behind his procession like a celestial comet. He visited mosques, spoke with scholars, and gave generous alms to the poor. Gold flowed from his hands like water. Musa's pilgrimage had reshaped an entire economy without a single sword drawn. The world was beginning to understand his power. Mali, once a name whispered in the trade routes, now echoed in royal courts. Musa's generosity wasn't aimless. He discussed theology and philosophy as deftly as he spoke of politics. Musa visited Al-Azhar Mosque, a beacon of Islamic learning. He walked barefoot to mosques, humbling even the most pious clerics. The Sultan of Egypt hosted Musa in a palace draped in silk. They offered treasures, hoping to share in his golden blessing. For no treasure could surpass what he already carried. Musicians from Mali played haunting melodies as the nights passed. It was a rolling empire of wealth, faith, and prestige. Gold lingered in its streets like sunlight on water. The Golden King had left his mark. As the caravan turned toward the Red Sea, Musa felt the weight of his journey. The lands ahead waited to be astonished. Along the way, caravans from Arabia joined his procession. Discipline and generosity radiated from its core. Musa personally oversaw the distribution of gold and food to fellow travelers. This was sacred ground. In Mecca, he performed the rituals with quiet devotion. There was no throne, here only faith. The pilgrimage transformed Musa. Though he arrived as a king, he prayed as a humble believer. Pilgrims from across the Muslim world spoke of his humility. It spread his legend farther than gold ever could. When the final prayers were done, Musa vowed to return to Mali with new knowledge. Not just as a ruler, but as a visionary. Scholars from Arabia and Persia joined his entourage. They carried scrolls of science, mathematics, and theology. Musa's empire was about to become not just rich, but enlightened. The pilgrimage had opened doors that gold alone could not. On the journey back, his caravan was larger than ever. Scholars, artisans, and traders followed him like a flowing river. Cairo welcomed him again, this time with reverence. They no longer saw a foreign king, they saw a force of history. Musa replenished the gold he had given away by trading salt and goods. His wisdom was as sharp as his generosity. The return across the Sahara was a test of endurance, but the caravan moved like a well-trained army. Musa shared his vision with his generals. Mali would not remain just a kingdom of gold, it would become a beacon of learning. When the capital finally appeared on the horizon, cheers erupted. The king had returned with glory beyond measure. Drums thundered as the caravan entered the city. The people saw not just their ruler, but a legend returned. Musa ordered the construction of new mosques and schools. The pilgrimage's legacy would live in stone and knowledge. He built alliances with rulers he had met on the journey. The empire's influence now stretched far beyond the Sahara. Gold had bought respect, but Musa's vision bought something greater: immortality. The story of his pilgrimage would echo for centuries. Children learned to recite the tale with wide, awestruck eyes. He knew he had changed not just Mali but the world. Scholars filled his court, bringing ideas that would shape generations. It ended as one of the most powerful displays of wealth and vision in human history. In markets across Africa, the story of Musa's generosity became legend. Cartographers marked Mali on their maps with new reverence. In Cairo, Mecca, and distant lands, Musa's name became a symbol of power. Mali was no longer just a trading empire. Musa's people felt pride unlike any before. Wisdom had immortalized him. His pilgrimage remained unmatched in scale and impact. Musa's legend became part of Mali's soul. The pilgrimage of Mansa Musa became not just history, it became myth. When Mansa Musa returned to Mali, his name was already a legend, carried by merchants and scholars across continents. His pilgrimage had elevated not only his own image but the reputation of his empire to astonishing heights. Mali was now seen as the beating heart of wealth, faith, and trade. Musa wasted no time celebrating. Instead, he turned to building the empire he had envisioned during his journey. He called upon the architects, builders, and scholars who had accompanied him home from Cairo and Mecca. Among his greatest ambitions was the transformation of Timbuktu into the intellectual center of Africa. Timbuktu had long been a key trade hub, but Musa saw beyond gold and caravans. He saw a city that would become a light of knowledge for the world. He ordered the construction of Jingabar Mosque, a structure that would stand as a testament to both his faith and his vision. Thousands of workers began mixing clay, straw, and earth, building the mosque with precision and care. Musa spared no expense on this grand project, channeling his immense wealth into the creation of something enduring. As the mosque rose higher, scholars from Arabia, Persia, and North Africa began arriving in They came not for gold, but to be part of a new intellectual world, forming under Musa's rule. The king welcomed them with generosity, offering stipends, housing, and libraries filled with Timbuktu began to transform, its dusty streets filling with students, traders, and teachers. Musa believed that true power was not found in gold alone, but in the minds that shaped civilizations. The city became alive with debate, prayer, and the pursuit of wisdom. Markets flourished around this growing center of learning, as trade and knowledge intertwined. Musa established madrasas to teach language, law, science, and theology. The hum of recitation filled the air like music. Mali's trade routes grew more powerful as the empire expanded its influence over the Sahara. Salt, gold, ivory, and manuscripts flowed in endless streams through Musa's lands. His mastery over trade turned Mali into one of the richest powers in the medieval world. Traders from North Africa and the Middle East respected him as an equal, not a distant ruler of a forgotten land. Musa used his immense resources to fortify borders and stabilize internal trade networks. His army was disciplined and loyal, securing the empire's caravan routes from raiders and rivals. Merchants traveled in safety, knowing Musa's banners protected them from harm. This stability increased trust and trade tenfold. Foreign merchants began arriving from Europe and Arabia, seeking to exchange goods for the gold of Mali. Musa greeted them with diplomacy and generosity, winning allies instead of enemies. His palace in Niani became a court of wonders where poets, philosophers, and mathematicians gathered. Ambassadors from foreign lands stood in awe at the wealth on display and the discipline of his court. Musa never wasted gold. He used it like a tool to build a reputation that echoed far beyond his borders. He funded scholars to copy and translate important works from Arabic and other languages. Timbuktu became a melting pot where African, Arab, and Mediterranean ideas met and merged. Musa's vision extended beyond trade and scholarship. He knew an empire needed structure to survive. He improved administrative systems, creating officials who managed provinces efficiently. Roads were repaired and expanded to link distant regions to the capital. Communication became faster, and Musa's control more precise. Rival rulers began to view Mali not just as a wealthy kingdom, but as a rising power. Musa chose diplomacy over conflict. Gifts of gold, salt, and fine goods was sent to foreign rulers, forging bonds without bloodshed. His reputation as a generous and wise leader grew stronger with each passing year. The griots of Mali sang songs of his justice, leadership, and endless fortune. His faith remained at the center of his rule, guiding his actions and securing loyalty from religious leaders. Mosques rose not just in Timbuktu, but across the empire. Education spread beyond the elite and into village. Musa's dream was to create a unified realm where prosperity touched every corner. As literacy grew, so did Mali's influence. It became a beacon of Islamic learning and African power. Musa's image appeared on European maps, a golden king holding a nugget in his hand. Even lands he would never visit spoke his name in all. Mali became known as a land where gold seemed limitless and wisdom abundant. Scholars who studied in Timbuktu returned home to distant kingdoms, carrying with them the stories of Musa's empire. These stories inspired curiosity, admiration, and sometimes envy. Musa understood the power of myth and allowed it to grow. His wealth became larger in imagination than it was in reality, but that only served his power more. Trade intensified as foreign merchants sought a share of Mali's prosperity. Gold mines in Bambouk and Bure worked tirelessly to meet the demand. Musa ensured their security and efficiency like a king, protecting the beating heart of his empire. The prosperity reached farmers, craftsmen, and traders. Markets grew richer, villages flourished, and poverty became rare in his dominion. He believed in spreading wealth strategically, building loyalty through abundance. Trade guilds formed under his watch, bringing order and structure to commerce. No transaction was too small to be part of the golden machine he had created. The empire breathed wealth like air, and its rhythm was steady and strong. Musa's name alone could make or break trade deals across continents. Envoys traveled from Cairo, Mecca, and even Italy to secure relations with Mali. No African king before him had achieved such international stature. He was becoming not just a ruler, but a symbol. Musa invested in agriculture and infrastructure to ensure his empire was not dependent solely on gold. Irrigation systems improved, harvests grew stronger, and famine was kept at bay. People saw prosperity in their daily lives, not just in the stories of the court. His rule created an unspoken contract between ruler and ruled loyalty in exchange for stability and abundance. The empire felt unshakable, built on both wealth and structure. But Musa never allowed complacency to take root. He constantly sought knowledge, advice, and new ideas from scholars. His curiosity kept the empire evolving instead of standing still. He planned for the future, training loyal governors and officials who would one day succeed him. He understood that an empire must outlive the king who built it. At night, Musa often walked through the streets of Timbuktu. He watched students studying by lantern light, merchants closing their shops, and children reciting verses in the moonlight. This was the Mali. He had shaped a kingdom alive and thriving. His vision had turned Timbuktu from a desert outpost into a city known across the world. Its reputation rivaled that of Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba. Scholars called it the jewel of Africa. Musa stood at the center of it all, not as a tyrant, but as a builder. His leadership had blended wealth, faith, diplomacy, and knowledge into a single force. And with each whisper of his name, Mansa Musa's legend only grew stronger. As Musa's legendary pilgrimage returned to the heart of Mali, the empire's image was transformed into a beacon of unmatched wealth and influence. Traders across Africa and beyond began to whisper about the Golden King who traveled like a god. Gold markets in cities he passed through had still not fully recovered from the flood of wealth. His generosity was both admired and feared, for it shifted entire economies overnight. Upon arriving in Mali, the people greeted him as if the heavens themselves had sent him back. Musicians filled the streets, griots sang of his deeds, and nobles bowed low before his presence. His caravans carried treasures unseen in West Africa, treasures that would reshape Mali's future. Musa wasted no time in using this wealth strategically. He ordered the construction of great mosques, libraries, and universities to strengthen his empire's foundations. Cities like Timbuktu and Gao began to shine like intellectual capitals of the world. Scholars from distant lands traveled for months just to study in the empire Musa built. Architects and artisans, many from Cairo and Mecca, were commissioned to construct breathtaking buildings. One of Musa's crowning achievements was the commissioning of the Great Mosque of Jingu. It was a statement to the world. Mali was not only rich, but also enlightened. Under Musa, learning became a treasure as valuable as gold itself. He attracted Islamic scholars, poets, mathematicians, and jurists from across continents. Musa personally ensured that education thrived in his empire's heartlands. Timbuktu grew into a city of scholars, with thousands of students studying theology, law, astronomy, and philosophy. Merchants from Arabia, Egypt, and Europe saw in Musa's Mali a center of wealth and opportunity. Trade routes expanded, linking Mali to North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Gold, salt, ivory, and manuscripts flowed like rivers through his markets. Musa's policies ensured peace along these trade routes, further boosting economic power. His wealth was no longer just measured in gold, but in the knowledge and influence he commanded. Musa's political strategy was subtle but effective. Instead of merely conquering territories, he brought distant rulers into alliances through wealth and learning. Diplomats spoke of him with awe, referring to him as the Golden Lion of the Sahara. His empire stretched across deserts and rivers, binding cultures and nations under his golden banner. Musa also maintained a vast military to secure his borders and trade routes. His soldiers were well-trained, disciplined, and loyal to their golden king. While Musa preferred diplomacy and prosperity, no rival dared challenge his might. His reign became a symbol of power that didn't need to roar to be felt. Mali's borders expanded, bringing more lands and resources under the empire's control. Musa's ability to balance wealth, religion, learning, and power made him a rare leader in history. Yet behind the splendor, Musa was acutely aware of how fragile power could be. He knew that gold could elevate a kingdom just as easily as it could invite its downfall. His advisors often warned him about foreign envy, about kingdoms that watched his every move. Musa responded by strengthening diplomatic ties with the Islamic world. His pilgrimage had already made him a respected figure in Mecca and Cairo. Now, he used those relationships to fortify Mali's position on the global stage. He invited scholars from the Islamic world to teach in Mali's madrasa. The more Mali integrated into the intellectual world, the harder it became for enemies to isolate it. Musa also ensured that the economy did not depend solely on gold. He expanded agriculture, salt mining, and manuscript trade to build a sustainable empire. The people flourished as their markets boomed and their cultural identity strengthened. Musa's golden age wasn't just for the nobles. It touched commoners as well. Farmers had better tools, merchants had more routes, and students had endless knowledge to pursue. Musa personally inspected public works and made sure his empire didn't drown in its own wealth. He understood that unchecked opulence could lead to complacency and eventual decline. This foresight made him a ruler not just of power, but of wisdom. News of his greatness reached even the distant shores of Europe. Cartographers in places like Venice and Genoa placed Musa on maps, depicting him with a golden scepter. To the European world, he became a legend, the richest man to ever walk the earth. Musa's image began to inspire merchants, explorers, and even future conquerors. They dreamed of reaching his golden kingdom, where wealth was said to flow like water. Musa, meanwhile, focused on ensuring Mali remained a strong, independent power. He invested in infrastructure, building bridges and roads to connect cities more efficiently. He created systems of taxation that were fair and fueled the empire's growth. The royal court became a hub of both political power and cultural brilliance. Poets recited verses about the glory of the empire, immortalizing Musa's deeds. Artists crafted intricate jewelry, fabrics, and carvings to reflect Mali's golden identity. Musa encouraged these creative expressions because he understood their value in shaping legacy. Every celebration, every structure, every scroll carried his name into eternity. Musa also strengthened the role of Islam in daily governance. He established Qadis, Islamic judges, to ensure justice in his empire aligned with religious principles. Yet, he maintained tolerance for different communities, ensuring harmony. This balance of faith and governance earned him deep respect among his people. His reign became known not just for wealth, but for fairness. As years passed, Musa's influence grew so vast that even foreign rulers sought his favor. He became a king whom no one could ignore. His envoys carried golden gifts to distant courts, spreading Mali's fame. Some called him the King of Kings, a title that symbolized the reach of his power. Despite his wealth, Musa was known for his piety and humility. He prayed daily, reminding himself that all wealth was transient before the divine. His faith grounded him, even as empires bowed to his influence. He treated scholars with the same respect he gave generals. To him, knowledge was the ultimate treasure, greater even than gold. Musa's story became a lesson for generations, that a kingdom built on wisdom lasts longer than one built on fear. His leadership attracted admiration not only from allies but also from rivals. Many tried to imitate him, but few could match the perfect blend of power and grace. Musa's name echoed through deserts and across oceans, a golden legend in human history. As his empire continued to grow, he prepared for its future, not just its present. He appointed capable administrators and ensured a clear line of succession. He trained his heirs to value intellect as much as wealth. Musa feared that unchecked greed after his death could undo everything he had built. So he put systems in place to safeguard Mali long after he was gone. Scholars documented his achievements meticulously, ensuring future generations remembered his legacy. Timbuktu became more than a city. It became a symbol of knowledge itself. Musa stood at the peak of his power, a golden monarch who reshaped the world's perception of Africa. But even as his fame soared, Musa never forgot where his journey began. He remained the same, pious man who walked to Mecca with gold, a king whose legacy would outlive gold itself. As Mansa Musa entered the later years of his reign, the Empire of Mali stood as the wealthiest and most respected power of its time. The world had come to view Mali not as a distant kingdom, but as a beacon of gold, knowledge, and faith. Musa had successfully turned his pilgrimage into a powerful narrative that reshaped Mali's destiny. Traders from across Africa, the Middle East, and Europe now flowed into his cities like rivers converging at the sea. Timbuktu, once a modest settlement, became the crown jewel of learning in West Africa. Its streets echoed with the sounds of debate, recitation, and the scratching of pens on parchment. Musa would often walk among scholars, listening to their discussions about philosophy, astronomy, and theology. He believed that a ruler who ignored learning would be like a king ruling an empty palace. His vision for Mali was far greater than its gold. He wanted it to be remembered as a civilization of the mind. He knew gold could be stolen, but knowledge could not. To ensure this, he funded the copying of countless manuscripts and books from distant lands. Libraries grew like gardens, each filled with the seeds of wisdom that would bloom for centuries. Musa also worked to maintain unity within his vast empire. With prosperity came ambition, and ambition often carried the shadow of unrest. He carefully appointed governors he trusted, men of both loyalty and intellect. Musa knew power had to be shared wisely if it was to endure. He maintained a delicate balance between the central court and regional rulers. This prevented uprisings and made distant lands feel part of a greater whole. Diplomacy remained one of Musa's strongest tools. Rather than waging endless wars, he forged alliances with neighboring rulers. He sent golden gifts, scholars, and artisans to neighboring kingdoms as gestures of goodwill. His empire grew not only through conquest, but through respect and cooperation. It was this strategy that allowed Mali to expand without crumbling under its own weight. Musa's personal character remained deeply humble despite his overwhelming fame. He prayed regularly, reminding himself of his duty to God above all. In court, he was known for listening more than speaking, a trait rare among kings. His people adored him, not just as a ruler, but as a guardian of faith and justice. Musa also recognized the importance of securing Mali's future beyond his lifetime. He began training his successors not only in ruling, but in thinking. He believed that an empire ruled by wisdom would stand even when its gold was gone. His sons and heirs studied under the greatest scholars of Timbuktu. They learned about diplomacy, economics, religion, and the weight of leadership. Musa wanted them to inherit not only his throne but also his vision. As his influence stretched far beyond Mali, stories about him grew legendary. European merchants drew maps with his image crowned in gold, holding a golden nugget. To them, Musa was not just a king, but the living embodiment of unimaginable wealth. Yet within Mali, he was remembered as a man of knowledge and justice. Musa continued to build structures that would last centuries. Roads, mosques, universities, and marketplaces rose across his empire like golden veins connecting its heart. His investments were not for vanity, but for legacy. He wanted Mali to stand long after his name was spoken for the last time. In his later years, Musa often sat in silence on the palace balcony, watching the city glow under the setting sun. He saw caravans returning with spices, gold, manuscripts, and fabrics. He saw scholars in robes passing through busy streets. He saw farmers celebrating good harvests, and he saw a kingdom at peace. Musa knew not many rulers were given the gift of seeing their dreams come to life. He had achieved more than he once imagined. His heart swelled not with pride, but with gratitude. As he aged, Musa began delegating more responsibilities to his council. He trusted them to continue guiding Mali with the same care he had given it. He understood that a wise king prepares his people to rule without him. He began spending more time in reflection and prayer. the empire did not falter. Instead, it grew stronger as governance became more balanced. Musa's faith remained a cornerstone of his life. He donated vast sums of gold to support scholars, build mosques, and help the poor. His people believed their blessings were tied to his piety. Even foreign visitors remarked on the serenity and order within his kingdom. Musa's health eventually began to decline, a reminder that even golden kings are mortal. Yet he faced this truth with the calm of a man who had already built eternity into his name. He summoned his advisors and sons to his chamber to speak of the future. He told them that empires fall when rulers forget that wealth is a tool, not a throne. He urged them to protect knowledge above all. He reminded them that Mali's strength was not in its gold, but in the hearts of its people. His words were etched into the memory of all who stood before him that day. Musa's final days were peaceful, surrounded by his family, scholars, and the hum of prayers. Across Mali, mosques echoed with supplications for their golden king. The empire that had risen from the Sahel to greatness held its breath. When Mansa Musa passed away, the news spread like wind through the desert. Cities fell silent in mourning, and people spoke his name with reverence. His funeral was grand yet dignified, reflecting his legacy, wealth wrapped in humility. Poets composed verses that would be recited for centuries. Scholars wrote chronicles that ensured his deeds would never be forgotten. His sons carried his vision forward, though none could truly replicate his greatness. But that did not matter, for Musa had built something far greater than himself. His empire had become a force of knowledge and trade that would echo through history. Even after his death, Timbuktu remained a center of learning and power. His golden pilgrimage continued to inspire leaders and dreamers across the world. In distant lands, his name became a symbol of unimaginable wealth. In Mali, his name became a symbol of wisdom, justice, and faith. Generations later, people would still tell stories of the man who changed history. Mansa Musa became a legend, his story woven into the fabric of Africa's identity. Travelers spoke of his pilgrimage as if it were a myth carved from gold. Mapmakers continued to place his image on their charts as proof of a land of riches. But those who truly knew his story understood it was not gold that made him great. It was his vision, his faith, and his unshakable belief in the power of knowledge. He left behind an empire that shone like the sun over the Sahel Mansa. Musa's journey ended, but his legacy began to stretch into eternity. To this day, his name stands as a golden monument in the story of human civilization.